Morning. Good to have you with us on a busy Friday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to get started with this breaking news in the Middle East. Iranian state media says Israel has launched new strikes on the country this morning following deadly attacks overnight. The Israeli military says more than 200 fighter jets were involved in the strikes that were aimed at Iran's nuclear sites. Senior Iranian military leaders and some of the country's top nuclear scientists were among those killed in the attacks.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called it a, quote, targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's survival. He added the strikes would continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. The U.S. had been urging Israel to not make a move like this as the Trump administration worked to make a nuclear deal with Tehran. The Trump administration said it was not involved in the strikes and was not providing Israel with military assistance. NBC News military analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs is standing by with analysis, along with NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, who has the latest from Washington. Let's begin with NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley, who is following the latest developments from Tel Aviv. Matt, good morning. We know the strikes have continued this morning. What can you tell us about how they unfolded and their impact on Iran so far?
Yeah, good morning, guys. You're right. Those strikes are continuing. We're continuing to get word of new cities and targets that the Israelis are hitting. A lot of this coming from Iranian state television and official sources there. You know, all of this started at about 2 or 3 in the morning, and the Israelis did have a siren here in Tel Aviv. This was, as you mentioned, and as we're hearing from Israeli officials, a huge attack, the largest that Israel has done against the Iranian nuclear technology program. This is still ongoing. We're still hearing about Iranian retaliation, and we're still expecting that here. There were about 100 drones, as you mentioned, fired from Iran at Israel, and it looks as though the Israelis swatted most of those away before they even entered Israeli airspace. So the big retaliation, the punishment, as you mentioned, coming from Iranian officials, is probably yet to come. Nevertheless, I've been walking around this city, and it looks as though people are kind of out and about, but it is a much diminished crowd from what you would normally see in the beginning of a weekend here in Tel Aviv. People had been instructed by the Israeli government to stay as close as possible to protected shelters and buildings. Just a couple of hours ago, the Israelis lifted that order, so everything is, as far as on an official level, back to normal. There's no more recommendations for people to seek shelter, but this whole region and this country is girding for the kind of war that they have long dreaded. Guys?
Matt, Iran's foreign minister is saying that the Israeli attack violated the United Nations Charter and that Iran has a legal right to respond. Tell us more about what we're hearing from Iran this morning, how we are expecting them to respond.
That's right, from Iran and from governments throughout the Middle East. They're condemning this attack and, as you said, echoing that language, that this is a violation of Iranian sovereignty, and noting that the Israelis struck first. They did not strike against Iran with provocation, though the Israelis have said that the Iranians were advancing their nuclear program, and that is why they decided to strike now. We also heard from the Iranian government that the top echelon of the Revolutionary Guard Air Force was killed, all of them together, in a meeting underground, in a kind of like a bunker. So we're hearing more and more from the Iranians about who was killed, and it sounds as though there's shades of what happened in Lebanon against Hezbollah. The Israelis seem to be picking off top leaders. The 3 top military commanders were killed of the Iranian military. 2 nuclear scientists were also among the dead. And again, we're still seeing these strikes happening, so we're probably going to see a longer list of the fatalities as the days go on.
Matt, can you tell us more about the response in the region from countries like Egypt and Jordan? I mean, is there any sense this conflict could spill over, that we could see a wider war in the region?
Well, you know, it's a good question, Joe. And like I said, they are condemning this. They're saying that it's a violation of national sovereignty for the Iranians. But the big question here, or what would have been the big question here, is how Iran might respond with its proxies throughout the region. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen. There were militant groups in Syria and Iraq who are financed by Iran. And, of course, Hamas in the Gaza Strip. But, guys, over the past year and a half, all of those groups have been very much destroyed, with the exception maybe of the Houthis in Yemen, who are still firing rockets at Israel. Now, we did hear from television here in Israel that the Iranians had asked the Houthis in Yemen to join their retaliation. But we did hear from Hezbollah in Lebanon that they are not going to be attacking Israel as part of this Iranian retaliation. So it looks as though Israel has already done the dirty work of putting down so many of these Iranian proxy groups throughout the region. Now they can just focus on their main target, Iran itself.
All right, Matt Bradley starting our coverage from Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you.
Well, for more on this, let's bring in retired U.S. Army Colonel Jack Jacobs. He is a Medal of Honor recipient and an NBC News military analyst. Colonel, thank you very much. We always appreciate when you join us. Based on what we know, this attack took out some of the senior-most leaders of the Iranian military and, as we mentioned, those top nuclear scientists, and then also the physical targets. What do you make of the scale of these strikes, what the Israelis were trying to achieve, and if they did, in fact, achieve?
Well, let's take the leaders first. In the past, the Israelis have gone after leaders, nuclear scientists, as you said, and it has not slowed down Iran's capability to develop nuclear weapons. So there's probably a deep bench inside Iran, eliminating military leaders, even on the battlefield, usually does not have the desired effect because people rise from the bottom, rise to the occasion and take over. So this is killing off the leadership of the Iranian military will not have the desired effect immediately. The objective, on the other hand, of the Israelis is to galvanize the population inside Iran, who will be mortified by what Israel is doing, and hope that the population will revolt against the theocracy because they don't want to be on the wrong end of Israel's wrath. So it will have less of an effect on the development of nuclear weapons than having an effect on the population. With respect to destroying Iran's physical capability to enrich uranium, they went after the easy target, which is at Natanz. But it's unclear that Israel has attacked or even has the capability to attack the facility at Fordo, which is at Qom. This facility is way underground and requires the kind of technology Israel does not necessarily possess. Could go after it with bunker-busting bombs, but we have to remember that the enrichment facility at Qom is maybe as much as half a mile underground. That'll require a different kind of technology that Israel probably does not, at the moment, possess and may require from the United States.
Colonel, as we discussed with Matt, this is raising fears of a wider war in the Middle East. I mean, just based on your experience, what do you think are the immediate consequences and potentially long-term consequences of what we've seen in the last 24 hours?
Over the short to medium term, you'll get a lot of support for Iran from countries in the region and elsewhere. From North Korea, you'll hear North Korea say what a terrible thing it is and so on, but not much support. As we heard, a lot of the support for Iran in the region, the proxies have been reduced in their capability. You will see, you'll hear from the United Nations saying that it's not the right thing to do, and that Israel has broken international law. But if you look at it from Israel's point of view, in Israel's view, the development of nuclear weapons by Iran is an existential threat. We hear that all the time. It sounds like a cliche. But at the end of the day, the possession of nuclear weapons by Iran was sworn to destroy Israel. And by the way, also destroy the United States. Those kinds of things is what drives Israel to do what it's done. Interestingly, Israel has been arguing for decades to be able to attack nuclear facilities inside Iran. And they've been dissuaded from doing it by the United States. I think Israel's perception and its intelligence at the moment, its intelligence information, has concluded that now is the time to do it before Iran has the capability to actually produce sufficient nuclear fuel to have nuclear weapons to destroy Israel.
Colonel Jack Jacobs, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your expertise.
Now, picking up on what the colonel just said, last night in a statement, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S. was not involved in Israel's attack against Iran.
These airstrikes come as officials in Washington are gearing up for that first military parade in more than 30 years. It's scheduled for tomorrow to honor the Army's 250th birthday. Also happens to be President Trump's 79th birthday.
NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard is live in Washington with more on both these stories. Vaughn, we'll get to the parade in just a moment, but first, tell us more now about the White House reaction to Israel's strikes against Iran.
Right. Immediately after these strikes, the White House made it clear that the U.S. was not directly involved in the attacks. This comes just days before more U.S.-Iranian nuclear talks were slated to take place here this weekend, and Israel's actions came as a surprise. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, in a statement saying Israel took unilateral action against Iran. We are not involved in the strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region. Goes on to say, let me be clear, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel. That was last night in the immediate aftermath of these strikes. The president himself, though, we should note, in just the last hour this morning from the White House, posting his own statement, which, to a certain extent, he appears to be taking credit for the strikes, while noting, quote, I gave Iran chance after chance to make a nuclear deal. I told them in the strongest of words to just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told, that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world by far, and that Israel has a lot of it, with much more to come. He goes on to say, no more death, no more destruction, just do it before it is too late. So the president, while not directly suggesting that the U.S. had a role in the actual attack, noting that U.S. military equipment was used by Israel to strike Iran, and there's question as to the extent of the U.S.'s awareness ahead of these strikes by Israel that these strikes were going to carry out.
Vaughn, the U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff was scheduled to meet with Iran's foreign minister in Oman this weekend to discuss a nuclear deal. But I mean, what kind of impact do these latest developments ultimately have on that meeting? Do we know if it's going to move forward?
Right. These nuclear talks with Iran have been going on for more than 2 months now. This weekend on Sunday in Oman would have been the 6th round of talks in which the U.S. directly engaged with Iran. As far as we are aware, Steve Witkoff, the president's special envoy, is still going to, with the intent to have those talks. I was told by one source from a Middle East country that has been working as an intermediary between the U.S. and Iran that they also plan on attending with Witkoff. So at this point in time, these negotiations will proceed. But the question here, more prominently for Iran, is how they will respond in the immediacy and the extent to which they are eager to actually continue to sit down with the U.S. and engage in these nuclear negotiations.
Vaughn, let's talk about tomorrow shaping up to be this dramatic split-screen day here in the U.S. We've got a lot of people expected to attend this controversial military parade, complete with tanks and helicopters. And then you've got organizers across all 50 states staging these so-called No Kings demonstrations, protesting the parade and the administration. What can we expect?
Right, you're looking at the tanks right there on your screen. You're looking at potentially more than 150 military vehicles, 50 military aircraft. More than 6,600 American soldiers are expected to take part in this parade in Washington, D.C. tomorrow evening, here right alongside the National Mall across from the White House. The president himself is expected to make an address commemorating the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. We expect soldiers to represent all of the different foreign conflicts that the U.S. Army have been engaged in to be a part of this parade. Of course, this comes at a time in which there is active U.S. military personnel engaged in the streets of Los Angeles, and we have not seen a military parade of this type in recent history in the United States. There's been a lot of criticism and pushback to it because of its millions of dollars in resources, the potential road road damage that is expected as a consequence of this. And of course, a much concern about the U.S.'s military role overseas, especially in the face of these latest strikes by Israel onto Iran, and the extent to which Iran views the U.S. as an ally of Israel in this in these recent strikes that have hit the country. Guys.
Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, a lot to cover. Thank you.
Well, this morning, the political and legal drama is intensifying in California over those demonstrations against federal immigration raids. There was late-night legal whiplash here over who controls the state's National Guard, the governor or the president. Yesterday, a federal judge issued an order blocking President Trump's deployment of the state's National Guard, ruling it was illegal. But then hours later, a U.S. appeals court hit pause on that judge's order. So now a court hearing is scheduled for next week.
Also yesterday, just this shocking moment out of Los Angeles. California Democratic Senator Alex Padilla was handcuffed and forcibly removed by federal agents from a news conference with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. The secretary alleges the senator yelled and lunged at her. Senator Padilla says that's not true, that he was only trying to ask her a question. We'd like to note video of the incident does not show the senator lunging.
NBC News correspondent Camila Bernal is live in Los Angeles to tell us more about all this. Camila, good morning. So Senator Padilla said he was handcuffed but not arrested or detained. Tell us what we know about what happened so far.
Hey guys, good morning. As you mentioned, there was this press conference where the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was speaking, and all of a sudden we hear and see all of this disruption, and the senator saying that he was there simply wanting to ask a question. That's when you see the video there where he's taken out to the hallway. That's where he's pushed to the ground by these agents, and the senator saying that he was there peacefully, that he had identified himself. The secretary saying that he did not identify himself, despite the fact that you could hear him on the video saying, I'm Alex Padilla, senator for California. And a lot of Republicans criticizing this, saying that the senator just wanted to get their attention, that the senator is essentially doing theatrics here. And then you have a lot of Democrats coming out in support of the senator, saying that they're concerned about what they saw, about this video, and about a senator being pushed to the ground. This is a son of migrants. So this is obviously an issue that is important to Senator Padilla. And he said that if this is happening to him, just imagine what's happening to some of the migrants out there, guys.
Camilla, so curfew was in effect for the third night in a row in L.A. yesterday. What's the situation like now? How are protesters reacting to this incident involving Senator Padilla?
Yeah, guys, this now started a week ago. It was last Friday when we saw these protests beginning because of the ICE raids. We're now in the third night of curfews here in Los Angeles, and just how I've been describing over the last couple of days, mostly peaceful protests. We did have incidents throughout the week that escalated, that got violent, where we saw vandalism and looting, but we have not seen a lot of that in recent days. Instead, we are seeing a large police presence and show of force as they disperse the crowds. Last night, when the curfew went into effect, of course, there were still protesters out there, and the police department here in LA, along with other federal agencies, using those flashbangs and trying to disperse those crowds, and they do so, and then overnight remains mostly peaceful. Again, we'll see what happens today, but there were some protesters saying they were concerned about what happened to the senator. Take a listen to what one of them had to say.
It was just disheartening, just because it feels like nobody is safe. It doesn't matter whether you're a U.S. citizen, whether you're a federal agent, whether you're in a public office, whether you're an immigrant. It just seems like nobody is safe here.
And you're hearing similar feelings from a lot of these protesters who say they're going to continue to be out on the streets. Most of them, again, peacefully protesting, guys.
Camila, let's also talk about this growing legal battle over control of California's National Guard, this whiplash we described. Walk us through what happened yesterday and what both sides are saying.
Yeah, it's been a back and forth, guys. And we know earlier in the week, the governor filed this lawsuit on behalf of California, obviously, saying that it was illegal to have the National Guard here because they did not request the Guard. They did not feel that it was necessary to have members of the National Guard here in California. They filed this lawsuit, and a federal judge in San Francisco agreed with the governor. But then hours later, the 9th District Circuit Court of Appeals coming out and essentially saying, no, the power goes back to the president, at least in the meantime. So there was this back and forth of the power going back to the governor. Now it's back in the hands of the president, at least until next Tuesday when we have the next hearing. The guards will likely stay here in LA.
All right, Camila, thank you so much.
This morning, states in the South are starting to clean up after a wave of deadly storms. In Texas, floodwaters tore through neighborhoods, flipping cars and forcing emergency rescue crews into action. And in San Antonio, authorities say at least 5 people have died. Several others are still missing after flash floods deluged streets there. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has the details.
San Antonio, Texas is reeling. Authorities desperately searching for survivors after police say a series of slow-moving storms left at least 5 people dead. Floodwaters overtaking the highway, rescuers moving in. Some areas getting over 6 inches of rain by dawn.
It's just like, it's not for real. It's like make-believe.
Angel Richards says her husband, Stevie, was driving to work when he called her from the car.
So it happened like really, really fast. From the time he called and said the car was stalled, and now it's floating. And then I can hear these things hitting up against the car.
She eventually made her way to this creek.
Right by the orange.
Yeah.
Even though it was flipped over and still partially submerged, Richards telling us she's confident that's her car. But she did not know what had happened to her husband.
They were searching the car and said, this is a Cadillac. And I was like, my heart just dropped because that's my car.
The city's fire department says there were at least 65 water rescues.
Authorities tell us a dozen people who managed to escape from vehicles that were in that creek wound up clinging for their lives high up in those trees.
There have been other floods here in the last couple weeks. What made this worse?
Well, we've had a lot of rainfall in the last week and probably 2 to 3 separate events. So the ground was saturated. So I think that just compounded the flooding.
And our thanks to Jesse Kirsch for that report.
Now let's bring in meteorologist Angie Lastman for more on what is ahead for the South and a check of your weekend outlook.
Hey, it's your morning news now weather. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. If you live in the East, don't put the umbrella away because you're going to need it here, especially as we get through the entirety of the weekend. Big picture look at what's going on right now. It's essentially going to be those scattered storms that are mainly focused east of the Mississippi. The West Coast looks pretty good. Honestly, dry this morning, and that's going to be kind of the trend that we see lasting through the rest of the weekend. In the meantime, we do have some flood alerts, not quite as many as were up yesterday at this time, but notice along the Gulf Coast, we've got those flood watches in effect and some flash flood warnings just along that border, or rather just into central portions of southern Louisiana. And we also have these newly added flood watches across parts of the mid-Atlantic. It's not raining all that much there right now, but we're going to see this kind of ramp up here, and that will be kind of the center of where some of the heaviest of the rain focus is as we get through the weekend. Otherwise, we've got plenty of rain across parts of the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Southeast, you name it, and essentially, again, east of the Mississippi, we're going to see those scattered showers and potentially some thunderstorms. Today, the severe risk is confined from Montana to the Texas Panhandle. It's not all that like high likelihood that we're going to see some of these really intense storms, but there's a few possible, so we'll be watching that into the afternoon hours. Tomorrow, much of that rain working into the mid-Atlantic, stretching down to the southeast. We'll see some of the heaviest rain, again, east of the Mississippi, but those stronger storms will be focused across parts of the western high plains. And then we get into Sunday, celebrating the dads across the east. You might want to have some of those indoor plans. We'll still be dealing with some rain for the mid-Atlantic and plenty of folks across the southeast and along the Gulf Coast. We'll get a little bit of a break for the Great Lakes and parts of New England, but still, it's not going to be all that sunny. So again, indoor plans are going to be a good idea, and we will have the flood concern. Here's the flood risk today. You can see it's pretty expansive when it comes to the slight risk. St. Louis, Memphis, Jackson, Houston, Washington, D.C., all included in those areas. So watch for the localized flooding as those showers and thunderstorms get ramped up. And by the time it's all said and done, guys, we'll have the potential to see upwards of 5 inches of rain, specifically across the mid-Atlantic, and that's why we're so concerned for the flooding throughout the weekend. So indoor plans for dads. Sorry if you live across the east.
No, not many.
We're used to it.
We are at this point.
We're getting creative. Thanks, Angie.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.